Oh yeah, I'm lying. I was on my tablet. If I loved something that I meant to laugh at or should have been laughed at, it was because I was on my tablet. I don't know who the fuck is watching this shit anyway. So and it's really, again, I always want to state that it really ain't got shit to do with who watches it or not. It's more for me and like my ability to voice, what's going on in my head and going on in my life, and having kind of a public record. And I can go back and I can look at it sometimes, and I can get on the other tablet because this tablet won't show me what live I posted unless I can record it. Fucking where the fuck is the title at, my nigga? We had a shooting over here. That's what I was talking to on the train. Yeah, we had a shooting over here, and we had a kid got killed. The dude that was initially targeted was killed, and then another kid got killed as they were trying to flee the crime. I hear the cops. Cops was right behind them. The cops saw the whole thing go down, and the nigga still got away. That shit that Kiara was talking about yesterday. That's what they was talking about earlier. That was crazy. And it's like, and we talking about Chesapeake. It was going on over in Chesapeake. And how they targeted us in Chesapeake. I mean, how they target us in the hood, period. They just target us. They on some really, like, we don't necessarily even want to gentrify. We want to populate. And that's, even that is like, see, when you start talking about multiculturalism and the multicultural agenda, you can't talk about the ethnicities involved in the multicultural agenda without talking about, again, the oppressor. White supremacy and its plan in relationship to multiculturalism. Even the LBGT Center, LBGT Center, but community. And you can't talk about these agendas without talking about the oppressor or white supremacy and the white supremacy agenda. What it design? You want to hit this?
No, cool. I'm about to check.
What it requires, or what it requires, and what in order to attain that agenda, and maintain the requirements of that agenda. And part of it, a large part of it is to disenfranchise black folks by whatever means necessary. And that, white people can't do it on their own. You gotta understand that they need a larger, okay, Mikio Kaku was talking about it in relationship to, and he wasn't talking about it in saying, I'm just using his analogy in relationship to Japan, its lack of immigration, of immigrants, so therefore the population of Japan is stagnant. America doesn't have the same problem. He wrote this book before fucking Trump, and still during the Obama administration, and in light of immigration reform, even though immigration needed to be reformed at that time, it still needs to be reformed. It wasn't as much of a hot button issue, even though it was, reaching that point. Immigration was, the classification of certain people as illegal and so forth. And you have to look at that dynamic too, because when you think about illegal immigration and how it's perceived to affect black folks, and how black folks react to the idea of how perceived immigration, or the perception of immigration affects them, and how they react, and how those who are immigrants, legal or illegal, and I'm just using that terminology within, for technical reasons. I don't believe that any person should be considered legal or illegal. And then that's another philosophical argument as far as America is concerned, and the way in which they acquired this land that they call America and established this nation and these boundaries that we refer to as America, especially in relationship to Mexico. Because Mexico is Mexico, and the state of Mexico is a direct result of American corporate policy and American continental international policy. America has done things to Mexico to make certain that Mexico remains in the dire state that Mexico remains in. So it's not, again, you can't talk about Mexico and what's going on in Mexico and how immigrants, legal or otherwise, from Mexico act when they get to America, not necessarily act, or the reasons why they come to America. the reasons why they illegally come to America and go through the perils in which they come to America, is directly related to American policies, ongoing policies, and the breaking of American treaties with Mexico. So we can't talk about, you know what I'm saying, the issues that we have in America with the black community, our different communities have, without first talking about, again, the white supremacist system and its agenda. And not just in relationship to America, but in relationship to the West, period, in relationship to Europe, period. That includes Germany and Germany's effect with eugenics upon the overall Mexican psychology that still has effects to this day. So you can't talk about these things without, I mean, you have to have the context. That's why more information is important. The more information that you have about any circumstance, the better you can evaluate that circumstance, because you understand all the contributing factors to that circumstance, and that you don't leave anything out of because if you leave something out of the equation, then you take it out of context. So when you talk about multiculturalism, you got to talk about it within context. That there is an agenda that makes multiculturalism a threat to black people. It's not the individuals within the multicultural that make up, you know, the ethnicities that constitute multiculturalism. It's not their fault. But it is their responsibility to agree in relationship to how they choose to interact with the black community, and what kind of visibility they want to give us as a community. Do you want to give us a pseudo visibility, which a lot of ethnicities that make up the multicultural community want to view black people, you know, or view us with a pseudo visibility, not with authentic visibility, and that is in relationship to what we have done in relationship to make it easier for other ethnicities to benefit in this country, to prosper in this country, while still us not reaping the benefit of our hard work. And that goes back to European immigrants, and they're only legal immigrants because they met the status quo, they met the agenda. At the end of the Civil War, there was a realization that the population of Africans was outnumbering the population of whites. So there was a need for a white population influx. But that white population influx needed to understand that it was still inferior to the original American European. So there was a cultural clash as far as that's concerned. And not even that is bigger than that, is that the agenda of the larger fucking governmental structure, as far as its, you know, maintaining the status quo, was not trickled down or even, you know what I'm saying, shared with the working class white folks that were here prior to the European immigration influx that occurred after the Civil War. That's where the American Dream campaign comes in. So for motherfucking Americans to be like talking about, African Americans to be talking about, well, you know, I just want my piece. The American dream was meant for me, and so on and so forth. Like the nigga talking about we're gonna make America great again, and how he's talking about he was never a slave and he don't know nobody who was a slave. Nigga, you ain't looking hard enough. That's the problem. You ain't looking hard enough. The American Dream campaign had nothing to do with African Americans, free slaves. It was a campaign to encourage working class Europeans to come to America, and they were given land grants and so forth. If the American Dream campaign applied to us, we would have got our 40 acres of a mule. We didn't get our 40 acres of a mule. They were allowed free land grants so that they would have a step above the pre-existing African American community, the free slave community. This is the reason. And see, if you don't have this information, you can't look at the problem in context. You know what I'm saying? You can't look at it in its whole, because you're not looking at, you know what I'm saying, factors that have to do with the entire whole situation. And then even the Chinese were encouraged to come to America, you know. And the America that the Chinese came to was an America built on the backs of Africans, on African slaves. The entire Western economy was built on, literally built on the back of African slaves. The first commodity, the traded commodity, was African slaves. That was the basis for the Western economic system. outside of, you know what I'm saying, warmongering. But warmongering in association with slavery was, and it was and warmongering was just a part of the overall economy. But the investment, you know, capital came from human capital, which was African slaves. And they benefited in a way that, you know what I'm saying, the African continent did not in any way, form, or fashion. So trying to equate Africans' involvement in the transatlantic slave trade is like, you know what I'm saying, trying to equate, I don't even want to think of an analogy. I mean, there's probably 100 of them. But you can't equate the two based upon the benefit, the outcome. You know what I'm saying? The Africans were paid with colonization, 300 years of it. The Europeans were rewarded with the strongest economy in world history. So there's a differentiation with the outcome of an involvement. Not to say that they don't need to be held responsible for their involvement, but they dealt with their involvement or the circumstances of their involvement a lot quicker than Europeans did. Africa is still in disarray. Its economies are still in disarray, you know? South Africa, which was the primary colluder with the Europeans in relationship to the Africans, the transatlantic slave trade, definitely they spent 300 years. They still recovering from that shit. There's not a European country that is still recovering from colonialism or from slavery at all, or from the effects of slavery. I can't get the last little bit of water out here. I don't know what the fuck that is. I'm thirsty as motherfuckers. Hotter than African is a bitch. And that you know, this paradigm shift. This went on long, so I'm gonna cut it. But this went on long. But the paradigm shift. I'm gonna keep on talking about this shit. You know what I'm saying? Whether you want to hear it or not. Eventually, you're gonna get woke.